What's up guys, I'm Dave Klein, and welcome to my Elden Ring Lore series. Today we'll be covering a lord who would command the respect of his peers and amass a loyal following, the commander of the Redmane army, Radahn. Radahn is probably one of the most interesting characters we've seen updated thanks to Shadow of the Erdtree. So to be clear, this video will feature heavy spoilers from both the main game and DLC, and with that, we truly begin. Radahn was born to Rennala and Radahn, and the firstborn of his siblings. He's the older brother to both Rykard and Ranni. After Radahn would leave Rennala to marry Marika and become her king consort, Radahn would become a step-sibling to all of Marika's known children, meaning, of course, Mesmer, Melina, Godwyn, Morgott, Mohg, and eventually Malenia and Miquella. Depending on how you interpret Godric and Godefroy's heritage, he would also be related to them, whether as a step-uncle or step-sibling. This means that, thanks to the new union, Radahn would now be considered a step demigod. Radahn was amongst the children of Rennala and Radahn, who became demigod stepchildren after Radagon's union with Queen Marika. As we know though, Radahn actually is Queen Marika, and while I'm not sure exactly how this plays out in terms of children, abilities, and the like, really, I think that technically would mean that Radahn, Ranni, and Rykard were always demigods. They just weren't officially viewed that way, as it was a secret that Radahn and Queen Marika were the same, and nobody outwardly knew. Radahn grew up idolizing Marika / Radagon's former lover, Godfrey, although it's unclear if he was ever aware that Radahn was at one point tied to Godfrey. His lion armor was armor depicting the Golden Lion. The Golden Lion is said to symbolize Godfrey, the Elden Lord, and his beast regent Sirach. From his youngest years, Radahn was naturally captivated by the Lord of the Battlefield. And of course, his young lion's armor tells us that it was the golden armor worn by Radahn in his younger years. Proudly adorned with heroic red accents, it is fitting attire for a lion. I would guess that a lion is, once again, a reference to Sirach. This image to Godfrey would go beyond just Radahn's armor though, and into his army and castle. The Redmane castle contains an Elder Lion, which I would interpret to be a reference to Sirach. The Lion's Claw ability, which takes its attack directly from these Elder Lions, is a skill of the Redmanes who fought alongside General Radahn, somersault forwards striking foes with armament. And we do see Radahn use this skill when battling as young Radahn at the end of the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC, showcasing Radahn taking direct inspiration from the Elder Lions. His Redmane army also has imagery associated with lions, as the Redmane surcoat the soldiers wear depicts a Redmane lion raising a sword in the image of Radahn. Thus, they were Redmanes, and all prove they were worthy of the name. Generally speaking, male lions are distinguished by their red manes, so the Redmane army is a fitting name for Radahn, as he has red hair and takes inspiration from both Godfrey and Sirach. Speaking of which, while I've linked the red mane and lion quite a bit to Sirach and Godfrey, it also has a direct link to Radahn, and Radahn showcasing pride at being Radagon's son, and pride towards both of their red hair. Funny enough, I'm realizing I keep using that keyword of pride and proud to talk about Radahn, when pride is a word often associated with lions. What's interesting is that Radahn was said to hate his red hair. Every giant is red of hair, and Radahn was said to have despised his own red locks. Perhaps that was a curse of their kind. I don't think we ever get any concrete reasoning for why Radahn hated his red hair, and a lot of Radahn is wrapped up in mystery. I find that Radahn seems to be the more dogmatic side of Marika, who truly follows the Golden Order. So perhaps it's as simple as this linking him to fire giants, who had red hair and had instead accepted power from the one-eyed god, and seemed to have a flame capable of destroying the Erdtree. Radahn is a topic for another time, but interestingly, whereas Radahn despised his red locks, Radahn viewed his red hair as a positive thing, likely because he linked it to Radahn and seemed to put his father on a pedestal, similar to how he put Godfrey on a pedestal. From Radahn's Redmane helm, Radahn inherited the furious, flaming red hair of his father, Radahn, and is fond of its heroic implications. I was born a champion's cub, now I am the lord of the battlefield's lion. The young lion's helm similarly tells us that it's the golden helm worn by Radahn in his younger years, proudly displaying his heroic red hair. It is fitting attire for a lion. Continuing the lion theme, the Golden Lion Shield was awarded to especially valorous members of Radahn's guard on the occasion of its formation. His soldiers wore helms with visors fashioned after a lion's fangs, while the Redmane Knights wore helmets with a red plume, which is a symbol of Radahn's pedigree as Lord Radagon's son, the mane of the proud Red Lion. Their great shield was shaped like a fang, featuring the crest of a red-maned lion. The thing that would seem to link Radahn's appreciation to both Radagon and Godfrey is that they were both great warriors. Godfrey is perhaps the most notable great warrior, helping to defeat the fire giants and conquering all of Limgrave. And while Radagon's exploits aren't as noted as Godfrey's in the lore, Radahn did likely lead the armies that would duke it out against Liurnia and was noted as a great warrior. The First Liurnian War, Radagon's glory burns red as his hair. The Second Liurnian War, no victory for the Golden nor for the Moon, no prize for atonement, the birth of a vow. And from Muriel, Pastor of Vows,
Lord Radahn was a great champion, possessed of flowing red locks. He came to these lands at the head of a great golden host.
So while Radahn might not be as generally notable as Godfrey throughout the lands between, he was still known as a great warrior, hence where Radahn would seem to idolize him. Possibly before forming his army, Radahn would train, and in order to do so, he went to Sellia to study. This makes sense to me as I think Liurnia and Sellia were allied in order to form the Academy of Raya Lucaria, and Radahn is royalty in being Renala's son. Sellia seemed to be partnered with the Alabaster/Onyx Lords, for it was in Sellia that Radahn would study the gravitational arts alongside the notable figures of Ogha and Gaius. I get some mixed signals on why or when Radahn would study gravitational sorceries, but I'll start with what we know from the Remembrance of the Starscourge, which tells us that the Red Lion General wielded gravitational powers which he learned in Sellia during his younger days, all so he would never have to abandon his beloved but scrawny steed. This implies that by the time Radahn would decide to study gravitational techniques, it was both his choice and one that he did after becoming a knight and spending enough time with his steed, who we know thanks to digging into the source files is named Leonard. I bring this timing up because I think there's also a possible interpretation where Radahn could have been sent away, by his parents, to study the gravitational arts in Sellia, whereas this item description makes it seem to be through his own volition. From the Alabaster Lords, Radahn would study the Rock Sling and Gravity Well sorceries, which were gravitational techniques studied by the young Radahn. His master was an Alabaster Lord with skin of stone. He'd also learn Collapsing Stars, a gravitation technique mastered by the young Radahn. I thank you for your tutelage, for now I can challenge the stars. Redmane Knight Ogha studied alongside Radahn and was the longest serving member of the Redmane Knights. Ogha studied techniques to manipulate gravity alongside Radahn. The more notable figure Radahn would study alongside, though, was Commander Gaius. Gaius was the most senior disciple of the same Alabaster Lord who taught Radahn and Gaia gravitational technique. And on Gaius, from his remembrance we learn, both were his elder brothers to the lion, and both were cursed from birth. In spite of, or perhaps because of this very reason, Gaius was both Mesmer's friend and the leader of his men. So this actually gives us a nice bit of background into Radahn's youth. Both Commander Gaius and Mesmer were like elder brothers to Radahn, so that means at some point Radahn was spending time with Marika's other children, and those who were, perhaps unbeknownst to him, his half-siblings. After taking on the stars and halting their cycle, Radahn would update his weaponry, becoming known as the Starscourge. His Starscourge greatswords are a pair of weapons decorated with a lion motif. Radahn earned considerable renown as the Starscourge in his youth, and it is said that it was during this time he engraved the gravity crest upon these blades. Similarly, his lion greatbow was decorated with a lion mane motif and imbued with the gravitational power of the Starscourge. When used along with Radahn's spear, it becomes a true weapon of a champion. I place these events after halting the cycle of the stars, and I think the reason why could be an important clue as to why Radahn would war against the stars. But first, the reason I place him updating his weaponry with the gravity crest after halting the stars, as opposed to just prior, is due to the greatswords of Radahn players can obtain from Shadow of the Erdtree. Greatswords of black steel wielded by Radahn in his youth. These were in his possession immediately before his triumph over the stars, the swords of a lord who does not rely on physical strength and gravity alone. Notably, these versions of the sword don't have the gravity crest. To compare, here's a side-by-side of the two swords. Now, if we take the gravity crest and add it onto his greatsword, you can see that creates this symbol found on the Starscourge greatswords from the base game. So, we know that Radahn challenged the stars and halted their cycle, but there's a big question as to why. And for that, there's a couple of possibilities related to his family, which would both push the events of Radahn becoming the Starscourge a little further. Eventually, Radahn would leave Renala for Marika, and Radahn and Marika would have two children together, However, that works as they're one and the same. The twins Malenia and Miquella. Miquella would be cursed with eternal childhood, and he would grow up idolizing his older brother, Radahn. In their childhood, Miquella saw in Radahn a lord, his strength and his kindness that stood in stark contrast with their afflicted selves. And so, Miquella made his heartfelt wish that Radahn would one day be his king consort.
Lord brother, I'm going to be a god. If we honor our part of the vow, promise me you'll be my consort. I'll make the world a gentler place.
And Miquella is known for just how well he can compel, whether wanted or not, others to follow him and do his bidding. And in fighting Miquella during the events of Shadow of the Erdtree, should the Tarnished be grabbed by Miquella once, Miquella will proclaim,
I promise you, 1,000-year voyage guided by compassion.
Get grabbed a second time, and the Tarnished will have their hearts stolen.
Lord of the Old Order, let us go together.
Before breaking his own Great Rune, Miquella is able to put a spell on the various characters of Shadow of the Erdtree to follow him. He's even able to put a spell on Mohg, a powerful being and child of both Marika and Godfrey, in order to have Mohg do for him his bidding. From Malenia's set, Malenia awaited Miquella at the foot of the husk. My brother will keep his promise. He possesses the wisdom, the allure of a god. He is the most fearsome Empyrean of all. So, herein lies a question, and one that we never get a straight answer for. Did Radahn want to become, or choose to be Miquella's consort? I believe from what I've seen from online discourse, there are arguments to both sides. Even if Radahn didn't want to be Miquella's consort, would Miquella have been able to compel and basically force him to? From the Young Lion's Armor and Helm, we get the following line which Malenia whispered into Radahn's ear before spreading her scarlet rot and attempting to destroy him. Miquella awaits thee, O promised consort. This alone, for me, makes it seem like Radahn didn't want to be Miquella's consort, as Malenia basically had to march down and try to force him to be one. On top of that, Miquella promises to make the world a gentler place, but from everything we know about Radahn, that would seem to completely go against Radahn's nature. Radahn worships Radagon and Godfrey, the most renowned warriors, and by all appearances would seem to love battle. Hell, when it's his time to go and his men are trying to put him down once he's gone insane from Scarlet Rot, they put on a festival, which is a giant event for various warriors to attempt to battle him and kill him, as it seems like that's what Radahn would have wanted.
A war festival honoring the last battle and death of General Radahn, the mightiest demigod of the Shattering and bearer of a great rune. A celebration of war! The Radahn Festival!
Once the festival ends and Radahn is killed, Jaren will tell the Tarnished,
At last, the war festival has ended. Brave champion, you have our gratitude. The celebration was spectacular. General Radahn is surely pleased. Festering with rot and crippled by madness, all he wanted was an honorable death.
I know it would pain old Jaren, but war has always suited General Radahn best, and certainly far more than any honorable death. Endless war to invigorate the soul, as befits General Radahn.
So again, Radahn was someone who seemed to love battle and saw honor in dying through battle. Miquella is promising a gentler world, which would seem, to me, to go in stark contrast to that. Another bit I find particularly interesting is that the Radahn that players will fight in the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC is a younger Radahn who is acting as Miquella's consort. This is the Radahn who Miquella has brought back utilizing Mohg's body, and very specifically, Radahn is utilizing his greatswords that do not have the gravity crest on them. these are his swords pre-arresting the cycle of the stars. Radahn using his gravity magic to stop the stars in their tracks isn't a minor achievement, it's an incredible feat.
I can't fathom how Radahn was holding back something of that scale. He was a living legend if ever I saw one.
So why would Miquella utilize a version of Radahn who, to my mind, is perhaps less powerful? It could of course be because this is a younger Radahn or the Radahn he grew up idolizing, or perhaps there's some specific issue Miquella takes with Radahn arresting the cycle of the stars. Could it be that Radahn arrested the cycle of the stars to stop his fate? To make it so he wasn't under Miquella's spell and wouldn't be trapped into becoming Miquella's consort? While that's a possibility, I do want to mention the other angle, and one that I think more lore theorists were probably thinking was the case prior to the Shadow of the Erdtree, and that has to do with Radahn's sister Ranni.
The stars alter the fate of the Carian royal family, and the fate of your mistress Ranni. But long ago, General Radahn challenged the swirling constellations, and in a crushing victory arrested their cycles. Now he is the force that repulses the stars. If General Radahn were to die, the stars would resume their movement, and so too would Ranni's destiny.
Ranni specifically rebelled against the Two Fingers, Erdtree, and the Golden Order. She was the one behind the death of Godwyn, and therefore the indirect cause for America to shatter the Elden Ring. While we don't really know how much her brother, Radahn, knew about this scheme, we do know that their other sibling, Rykard, not only knew about it, but helped. From the blasphemous claw, on the night of the dire plot, Ranni rewarded Praetor Rykard with these traces. Should the coming trespass one day transpire, they would serve as a last resort foil, allowing Rykard to challenge Malekith the Black Blade, the Black Beast of Destined Death. So, the only way for Ranni's destiny to move forward, and her Age of Stars, is for the cycle of the stars to continue. The strongest bit of evidence that Radahn possibly halted the movement of the stars specifically to stop Ranni's destiny comes, well, partially in that term of what Ranni wanted, an Age of Stars.
To every living being and every living soul. Now cometh the Age of the Stars. 1,000-year voyage under the wisdom of the moon.
Whereas Radahn told the Alabaster Lord, "I thank you for your tutelage, for now I can challenge the stars," which would seem to pretty directly challenge Ranni. The other is something Blythe specifically notes about Radahn.
So Ranni's fate is kept in stasis by Starscourge Radahn.
Tying the two together.
The next time you speak to Iji, tell him this. The Festival of Radahn will surely set Ranni's fate back into motion.
Either way, Radahn would do the unthinkable and halt the stars. The mightiest hero of the demigods confronted the falling stars alone, and thus did he crush them, his conquest sealing the very fate of the stars. The Starscourge conflict. Radahn alone holds Sellia secure, and stands tall to shatter the stars. So again, I bring up, when did Radahn travel to Sellia to study the gravitational arts, and why? The two competing reasons we get are his remembrance, which states the Red Lion General wielded gravitational powers which he learned in Sellia during his younger days. Also, he would never have to abandon his beloved but scrawny steed, which would place his reason for studying purely on Leonard. Or him telling his Alabaster Lord, "I thank you for your tutelage, for now I can challenge the stars," which strongly makes it sound like Radahn specifically studied gravitational techniques so he could challenge the stars. Well, it's definitely possible Radahn initially wanted to study gravity magic for poor Leonard, and then while he was studying, decided he wanted to challenge the stars due to either Miquella, Ranni, or both. And honestly, unless there's some other major lore reveal, I don't think we'll ever fully know. As for the when, well, if he was studying alongside Commander Gaius, that would mean that he at least began studying the gravitational arts prior to the events of Mesmer's crusade against the Hornsent. So, as there's evidence that Mesmer's crusade took place before Radagon left Rennala for America, that would place this event before Miquella or Malenia were born. But then, what reason would Radahn have to want to battle the stars, as his reasons were likely to stop Ranni, who, so far as we know, hadn't began her scheme yet, or to stop his own fate of becoming Miquella's consort, who wouldn't have been born yet. So, honestly, I'm not sure. I mean, maybe he was just studying for that long, or he didn't end up duking it out with the stars until way later. Or, hey, maybe he just duked it out with the stars to be a badass, and it had nothing to do with any of these reasons. While this is definitely going to be one of those up to you and how you feel interpretations, to my headcanon, I prefer to think that Radahn fought the stars to halt his own destiny and never wanted to be Miquella's consort. And while I do think the reason Radahn chose to fight the stars is a little more contentious, it's honestly pretty hard for me to see the side of the argument where Radahn wanted to be Miquella's consort. Moving forwards though, Radahn would build up a large and incredibly loyal army who seemed to hold a high level of respect for him.
Champions, welcome! The stars have aligned! The festival is nigh! General Radahn, mightiest demigod of the Shattering, awaits you!
And in general, Radahn was viewed as an incredible warrior.
The general was blighted by scarlet rot and driven to madness. But not long ago, he was hailed as the mightiest demigod of them all.
To that end, Radahn's soldiers were also built up to be incredible warriors like himself. General Radahn's soldiers were all reputed to be masterful warriors, and it was popularly said that the Redmanes knew no weakness. They were also courageous. Radahn's soldier ashes are spirits who wield fiery weapons to perform powerful skills. Such is their valor that they will immediately attack after being summoned. I also think of Redmanes as having a high level of honor. After Malenia mars all of Caelid and Scarlet Rot, they stick together in an attempt to combat the Rot. When they were driven to defeat by Malenia's Scarlet Rot, the Redmane Knights burned the crest on the left breast of their armor to indicate their resolve. Alas, dear home, I shan't see you again, for our duty is to remain here, a bulwark against the Blight. I think it's fair to say this reflects back onto their leader of Radahn and who would choose to follow him or make it to the upper echelons of his army. Notable members of the Redmane army include Ser Jaren and Redmane Freya. At some point, although I'm not sure if this was before or after the events of Radahn becoming known as the Starscourge, Marika would shatter the Elden Ring, and through the actions of Radagon and the Elden Beast, become trapped in the Erdtree as a result. This would all lead to the Shattering Wars, which seemed to be started as a betrayal by Godofroy and Godric, who likely started the First War of the Shattering. The First Defense of Leyndell, a sovereign alliance rots from within, traces yet remain of bloody conspiracy. It's difficult to say if Radahn partook in this battle helping to defend Leyndell. However, the Second Defense of Leyndell, the Fell Omen, stacks high the corpses of heroes, yet the Erdtree remains unshaken. While this is all we directly know about the Second Defense of Leyndell, that there was a second one and Morgott won the battle in order to defend Leyndell, it's highly likely the Second Defense of Leyndell was against Radahn. Really, the only bit of evidence we get of this is from the intro cutscene, where there's an image of Morgott having the upper hand and seeming to defeat Radahn in battle.
Honestly, Godric's nothing more than a jumped-up country bumpkin. Lord? Oh, don't make me laugh. First, he hid himself amongst the womenfolk to flee the capital, then hid from Radahn in that castle. Then he insulted Malenia, lost to her in battle, only to lick her boots rather than die like a man.
I think of this line from Kenneth Haidt as helping to support the idea that perhaps Radahn was the aggressor in the Second Defense of Leyndell, lost the battle, and on his way back to Caelid, this was when Godric would likely have been hiding from Radahn in Stormvale Castle. So, Radahn left for Caelid and holed up there, but it was around this time that Miquella set his own plan into motion. Miquella wanted to become a god and use Radahn as his consort. From the Secret Rite Scroll, which tells how one can ascend to godhood utilizing the Divine Gateway in Nir Elam, a lord will usher in a god's return, and the lord's soul will require a vessel. So Miquella would be the god, and Radahn would be the lord. Miquella would have Malenia march south to force Radahn into becoming his lord, while Miquella would entice and entrance Mohg into becoming the vessel for Radahn's soul. Malenia marched south to Caelid in order to kill Radahn, which, again, is why I don't think Radahn willingly wanted to become Miquella's vessel. There's always the chance he said something along the lines of, "If you can defeat me in battle, I will." But the fact that Malenia had to march south with her entire army in order to force Radahn into servitude doesn't strike me as something Radahn willingly wanted. So Malenia and her Clean Rot Knights would clash with Radahn and his Redmanes. The Battle of Aeonia. Radahn and Malenia locked in stalemate, then the Scarlet Rot blooms.
The Conqueror of the Stars, General Radahn. And the blade of Mikkel and Malenia the Seventh. These two were the mightiest to remain, and locked horns in combat. But there would be no victor.
While fighting Radahn, it seems from the story trailer that Malenia was on the verge of losing. But just as she was about to, she whispers something in Radahn's ear, and thanks to the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC, we now know what that was. When Malenia, Blade of Mikkel, let the rot flower blossom in Aeonia, Radahn heard a murmur in his ear. Mikkel awaits thee, O promised consort. So in an attempt to destroy Radahn and force him into becoming Mikkel's consort, she bursts into Scarlet Rot, damning all of Caelid with them.
General Radahn, the famed Red Lion and Scourge of the Stars, is a ferocious warrior. He fought Malenia and her rot to a standstill in the Caelid wilds to Limgrave's east. And now Caelid has been engulfed by the Scarlet Rot. Even approaching the region is no mean feat. I've heard survivors of Radahn's army are still in the wilds, staving off the rot with fire.
While the Redmane Knights would remain, and valorously fought off against the Scarlet Rot with fire, Malenia would retreat back to Mikkel's Hellkite. Cleanrot Knight Finlay was one of the few survivors of the Battle of Aeonia, who in an unimaginable act of heroism, carried the slumbering demigod Malenia all the way back to the Hellkite. She managed the feat alone, fending off all manner of foes along the way. Meanwhile, General Radahn would become a husk of his former self.
General Radahn is cursed ever to wander. Eaten from the inside by Malenia's scarlet rot, his wits are long gone. Now he gathers the corpses of former friends and foes alike, gorging on them like a dog.
Amazingly, even while being eaten alive by Scarlet Rot, Radahn still managed to continue arresting the cycle of the stars. Such is his incredible power. But that's not where Radahn's tale ends. Led by Jaren, Radahn would be celebrated in the way only Radahn could be. Jaren would put together a festival for various warriors and champions to take on and kill Radahn in glorious combat. And it's during this time that a certain Tarnished would join that festival and ultimately kill Radahn, releasing his hold on the stars and resuming their cycle.
Did you see that afterwards? A falling star right before our eyes. I can't fathom how Radahn was holding back something of that scale. He was a living legend if ever I saw one.
With Radahn and his spirit free from his body, Mikkel's scheme to become a god could now advance.
As if using Lord Mohg to gain entrance to the Land of Shadow were not enough, he plans to use his corpse as the vessel of his king consort. He has forsaken Lord Mohg's soul. He desires only his empty shell. It beggars belief, but I'm afraid tender Mikkel fails to grasp the humiliation implied by this act. One thing is certain. My dear lord deserved better.
So Mikkel takes Mohg's dead body and uses it as a vessel for Radahn's soul in order to complete his ceremony to become a god and make Radahn his promised consort.
My loyal blade and champion of the festival. Both your deeds will ever be praised in song. Now, the vow will be honored, and my lord brother's soul will return, so that he may be my consort.
And with that, Radahn returns, now seemingly at the command of Mikkel.
Tarnished one, Aspiring Lord of the Old Order, if you have known sin, if you grieve for this world, then yield the path forward to us. To I, Miquella, and my promised consort, Radahn.
So Miquella and Radahn, together, will fight the Tarnished for Miquella's godhood. The question then becomes, is Radahn fighting the Tarnished now out of his own will, or has he too, like so many others, had his heart stolen, and has merely become another tool in Miquella's arsenal? And that wraps up my lore video on Radahn. Radahn and his story is definitely one of the most affected by the DLC, and I think it changed some people's interpretations of the events, and some people were pretty bothered by it. But I can tell you from making lore videos for 10 plus years on From Software games, and sometimes being proven wrong by the DLC, it really doesn't bother me, and I'm always pretty excited to find out new answers, even if it's not what I'd theorized, like a certain theory around Aldia and Dark Souls 2 I'd gotten completely wrong. I'm certain some of my interpretations will be disagreed with, which is completely fine, as that's part of the fun of this. If you do strongly believe Radahn agreed to and wanted to be Miquella's consort all along, you're wrong. No, I honestly don't know, and I'm happy to hear your counter evidence and counter thoughts. I've been wrong several times before or misinterpreted things, so I'm open to it. For more lore, I'd honestly recommend you check out other great lore YouTubers like Vadi, Smotown, Quaylog, or any other lore creator. If you did enjoy this, check out my channel for a playlist on other Elden Ring or FromSoft videos I've made throughout the years. I've even included the Elden Ring lore videos I made for GameSpot. Beyond that, I've been slowly working on a game with a friend, ChivalBee. It's a 2D action platform game in the vein of Mega Man or Shovel Knight with a bounce mechanic inspired by Castlevania Symphony of the Night. If it's not your thing, totally cool. But if it looks at all interesting, we'd appreciate your support by following us at Ophidian Interactive, where we'll be posting interesting updates when we have them. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.